Welcome to the Korea Pro Podcast, your weekly guide to understanding the most pressing and complicated developments shaping South Korea. We're your hosts, Jeongmin Kim,
John Lei,
and Joon Ha Park of Korea Pro.
Go beyond headlines as we explain not just what happened, but also what really matters and why it matters.
If you monitor South Korea for work or just trying to keep up, you're in the right place.
This is the Korea Pro Podcast.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the Korea Pro Podcast. It is now Thursday, September 11. It is a bit after 4:30 in the afternoon. And last week, when Lena and I were recording this podcast, we recorded this exactly 7 days ago. And this was before the excrements hit the fan.
And I completely missed this actually because I was in Portugal. But then even in Portugal, a lot of people reached out to me and walked up to me and said, did you see the detainment? I was like, what detainment? And apparently there was a raid in Georgia. There is I believe it's a electric car battery factory.
Correct.
By Hyundai and LG. It's like a joint venture sort of installation. And there were 332 South Koreans, and including others, 475 individuals that were arrested on the spot by U.S. customs officials. And walk us through what initially South Korea learned when it happened, John, on the day.
Initially, what we got were immediate news alerts on the wire services that the raid happened, that hundreds of people were rounded up and arrested. And we had no idea why they were arrested. We just knew that something was going on in Georgia. And as the headlines kept popping up, and this was happening really fast, it became quite apparent that this was an immigration raid by the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agents, ICE, as well as other agencies. All the alphabet soups were there. The DEA, the ATF, the FBI. They were all there. And of course, they were all under the umbrella of Homeland Security.
And also Georgia authorities and the Georgia court also approved the execution.
And this turned out to be what, at least according to Homeland Security said, was the biggest immigration raid in Homeland Security history, which was established in, I believe, in 2001. And so it's been quite the week. Well,
right, and there
progressed.
has been a lot going on when it comes to immigration-related raids, but not against allies like South Korea, who's there for a American industry-related factory, right?
Sure. Whenever we think of American immigration raids and deportations, we tend to think of people with darker pigmentation. But yeah, this was the first time that a South Korean factory was targeted, especially the Hyundai's largest factory in Georgia. I don't know if it's the largest in the United States, but it's definitely one of the biggest ones. It's a flagship operation. And so this was shocking to a lot of South Koreans, especially considering the fact that on July 31st, South Korea agreed to invest $350 billion in the U.S.
Plus that as well.
And then there was also that meeting between the South Korean and U.S. presidents at the White House on August 25th. And for all of these things to have happened beforehand, and then for this raid to happen, the common sentiment that we heard, not just among ourselves, not just among the South Korean public, but also within all manners of South Korean publications, was that this was a betrayal.
So I think there are a couple of things. We're yet to know exactly what type of visas these workers were holding. Reportedly, some were holding ESTA visas, which are travel authorization. Some were holding B1 visa, which is like short-term business visa, or B2, which is like very specific tourist visa. So the authorities from the U.S., they're claiming that these were workers that did not have work permit to actually work for manufacturing sites, basically. But also, so there are some legal aspects to it. But I think what really exacerbated the response in South Korea, the sense of shock in South Korea, was not just the detainment, arrestment, raid itself. If this was done secretly and quietly, I don't think this was this shocking.
They could have made a phone call.
Right, but I believe the next morning, South Korea time, the Atlanta authorities, I think they started it. They tweeted on X the video of workers in chains, in handcuffs, and being escorted to the buses and being bussed away from the factories. So this actually led to immense anger among South Korean public, and the polls show the result as well, because right now there are a couple of other actors involved in this case that are kind of accountable for. Some are saying it's the U.S., some saying it's the South Korean government, some are saying it's the companies. But because of this video and image sort of optics, South Korean public is assigning accountability to the U.S. Actually, what does the poll say?
Right. So there was a poll that was conducted immediately after the video sort of came out, and that was by the Pollster Real Meter. And 59.2% of the public that was interviewed and was surveyed, they said that they were disappointed in the U.S. government for carrying out such a raid in such fashion.
And the next in line was 30-something% who said that they understand.
30.7, yes. 30.7% said that they understand the U.S. government's position, saying that it was something that was inevitable.
It's also interesting because it sort of breaks along the ideological lines in South Korea right now. It's one of those cases where it's pretty clear like who favors what. The progressives and the centrists, over 60%, they are all saying that they're really disappointed with the U.S. behavior. Meanwhile, the conservatives are primarily saying that they kind of sympathize with what America has been going through and, Trump's initiatives. So this is quite interesting.
I'm a little confused by that poll, though. They said that about 60% of people were disappointed in the U.S. But disappointment and understanding are not mutually exclusive.
That's
you
true.
can understand someone but still be disappointed in them.
Absolutely.
And so if the poll had said that they blamed the United States, that would have been different. But they said they were disappointed. So I don't know why they chose this particular word.
That's probably not the smartest, statistically sound way of creating a survey. But let's wait for others like Gallup and NBS to conduct similar polls in coming days. I believe like some are coming out Friday, some are coming out Monday. So we have to keep an eye on that. But the primary sentiment in South Korea right now is like shock and disappointment, basically, despite reportedly the South Korean companies working with subcontractors did not follow the visa rules strictly. What did Trump say initially?
Initially, Donald Trump said that ICE was just doing its job and that they were illegal immigrants. But later on, Trump started to shift his tone just a little bit. Eventually, what Trump ended up saying, and this was the results of the plane getting delayed, the plane as in the one that's supposed to ship all those South Korean nationals back, being delayed, was that Trump said that he, even after this raid, even after their detention, he wanted these Korean engineers to remain to train American workers.
So what he exactly said, I think September 7, he said that if there's no workforce here that knows about batteries, we should help them bring some workers so that our workforce can be trained. So he's focusing on Korean technicians training American workforce rather than Koreans staying there forever to work. So that is how he sees the entire incident. And now the South Korean government, the foreign ministry, I think anonymized officials sort of spoke in Washington, talking to reporters, sort of tried to make it sound like optimistic, positive. Like the official said, Trump mentioning that they can stay and work, it means that they won't get any disadvantages. Well, I don't think so, because it's less about disadvantages or advantages. It's more along the lines of Trump's usual way of America first sort of policies. And it sort of fits right into it.
Well, we have to go back to this entire visa issue.
Yeah.
Yes, apparently some of these South Korean workers were either on ESTA, B1 or B2, as you mentioned earlier. And what the South Korean companies, what the South Korean executives have been saying is that they had no choice but to use this loophole because the United States has not had a separate visa category for South Korean temporary workers. And so because Donald Trump said that he wants the South Korean workers to stay, that he wants to have some sort of an arrangement, he's hinting that this sort of separate visa category could be made available for South Koreans in the future. But what's really important is that just today, I believe, the United States government made this new law regarding Australia. And this is rather salient, and that's because Australia, Chile, and Singapore are three countries that have these kinds of separate visa categories for their citizens. But I believe it was just today when the United States government announced that even those Australian workers on that temporary work visa will now need to go back to Australia once every 2 years to renew that visa. And so even if this sort of new visa category is made for South Korea, these kinds of restrictions will still very much apply.
So from like Korea, Australia, and other countries, like sort of being in the same bucket, like their point of view, it's quite contradictory because America is sort of nearly forcing them to invest in American jobs on American soil, and then
they are nearly forcing these countries?
Understating, like actually forcing with tariff reduction leverages, but at the same time, they are strengthening the visa rules specifically to satisfy the MAGA crowd back home.
And that's exactly the point. America saying, we want your investments here in our country. We demand it. but we are not going to give you the means to actually have that investment. And so, from South Korea's perspective, sure, this alliance that we have with America has always been an unequal alliance. It has always been asymmetrical. But that doesn't mean that we don't have, a sense of our own dignity or pride.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that we do not understand or we cannot recognize hypocrisy or inconsistency. And that has led to this increasing feeling of resentment and, as Real Media pointed out, disappointment.
John's about to swear, so I'm going to intervene. And that's actually, slap on the face for Lee Jae-myung administration as well, because guess what the nickname for the government is? People's Sovereignty Government. This is exactly a type of thing that Lee would have had in his nightmare. Like the situation where the South Korean nationals abroad, they are physically restrained despite some legal vulnerabilities and loopholes, like physically restrained, and those videos going viral.
Right.
It's something that is very damaging, not just for the alliance, but also for Lee's political standing here as well.
Which goes into our next immediate segue, which is the 100-day press conference that Lee Jae-myung just made today.
Our CEO Chad was there, prepared all the very fluent Korean questions, but he did not get picked. I'm not sure if I like the Lee administration being too fair with the random draw and everything. Too fair, I think. But anyways, we monitored the entire thing. And Joon Ha, can you walk us through some of the main things that were mentioned newly?
Right. So it was divided into 3 sessions. So it was divided into economy, politics, diplomacy, and security into one pool, and also society and culture in the third pool. And what we saw was quite a number of things on the sort of renewable energy. We also saw a couple of questions coming out from the crowd of reporters based on what the Lee administration will do with AI. There was nothing in terms of foreign policy regarding
a little bit
regarding just Beijing and Moscow, and what the current Lee administration actually thinks of the Beijing parade. There was no candid remarks from the president regarding how he saw the strategic alignment on the what do you call it, Tiananmen Square, and when you see his response to the question about North Korea and Japan, it was very much a reiteration of what we saw in past statements regarding the 2 countries.
Right, so it was mostly domestic politics and reform-related stuff, some on regional development and social and labor-related issues and trade, but we cannot go into everything, so let's not discuss any domestic politics stuff here. We will flag it if anything was important and further implemented, but let's start with trade and industries related remarks. There were a couple of very long responses when it comes to like mixing nuclear energy and renewable energy grids and why we need that. And then Lee always stayed clear of talking too much about nuclear power plants in South Korea, right? But he did give like long remarks about that today. What did he say?
The response that President Lee gave regarding the whole power grid and nuclear power was rather in a folksy sort of populist sort of way.
But also quite pragmatic logic as well.
A little bit. Now, obviously, South Korea needs a lot of data centers to become this third strongest AI power in the world or whatever their goal is. But in order to have that AI center, in order to have that data center, there needs to be a lot of energy. And what the president was saying during the press conference is that, okay, fine, we can build nuclear power plants for that, but building a nuclear power plant doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time. It can take even more than a decade.
Yeah. He said 15 years
15
specifically.
Years. But the president said, yeah, it'll take about 15 years to build a new nuclear power plant, but the sun's right there. We have the sun right now.
Like sun and wind.
The sun and the wind, we have it right now. So why not use renewable energy to power all of these data centers?
So the framing is quite interesting, right? Because usually when presidents like talk about renewable energy, they go for like internationally like recognized way of rhetoric that a state, leader of a state gives, like, oh, like we have to save the earth, like climate disasters, blah, 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 so we need renewable energy, carbon footprint, whatever. He did mention NDC a little bit, but he mentioned it in a sense that we cannot build more coal-related plants because, NDC, we have to stick to it. But the sun is right there, wind is right there, and we can use it because it's more efficient. And he was also like, we need to build 30 nuclear power plants. Where will we build it? He was basically saying there's no town in South Korea that will actually allow building nuclear power plants nearby.
So speaking about tone, yeah, the answer that he gave regarding energy was quite folksy, but the tone that he used when he talked about trade with the United States was not very folksy. it suddenly became very assertive. Remember how after that August 25th meeting, I said that his brown nosing was extremely relentless? Well, this time around, the tone was the exact opposite. Sure, he wasn't screaming and raving, he wasn't screaming bloody murder, but what he essentially said was that if the United States does not issue these kinds of new visa categories that we talked about earlier for South Korean employees, for South Korean citizens, then South Korean companies would find it very difficult. The word that the president used was hesitant, that they would be hesitant to continue the investments in the United States. This was essentially a threat. It was a veiled one. It was covered in a diplomatic speak, but this was a very assertive way for the South Korean president to address Washington. So I was really surprised by how the president quickly changed his tone when he was talking about trade.
And also when it comes to financial crimes and improving rights for the minority shareholder, he was also like, his tone was like very, very strict. And it was actually quite interesting. He did mention, let's start with the industrial disaster related stuff as well. He sort of doubled down on whatever he said so far. But he even went further when it comes to his past rhetoric about, they are near murder. They were saying that, he was saying that because these companies with pattern behavior and similar accidents happening over and over, because they can just pay when there is a lawsuit, that's why they're doing it again. So he was doubling down actually more formally that he will try to aim at
maximizing pain
through criminal lawsuits as well. So that was interesting, something we have to keep an eye on. And when it comes to financial crimes like stock manipulation and also stripping off of the rights for the minority shareholders, he was saying something else as well. He was saying for these, it works better if you aim at a legal system where they have to pay a really, really big amount for punishment rather than criminal case. So he's using legal system in a way that he thinks suits better, depending on the target. But he was also saying at the same time, South Korea has become too much overly litigious country, especially since President Yoon. So all of this is slightly contradictory, but along the similar lines of he will strengthen rights for ordinary people. So overall, these were all like very populist, but also it echoes well with the general public that are monitoring these news. Anything from society-related topics or domestic politics that were actually like very interesting to you?
Right. So we did see the first question of the lot coming out, and it was delving into the whole idea of the winter examinations. So the 수능, basically college entrance exams. And the reporter was asking the question of how sustainable is this sort of education system within South Korea's current educational makeup. Lee Jae-myung, he did say that there was some sort of a caveat on how the South Korean public that's subject to this sort of educational system, this is something that's wrong and something that needs to be fixed, but it's a systemic issue that the current administration, it was very wishy-washy sort of response.
And he also, one of the hottest topics right now at the National Assembly and among journalists as well, is the National Assembly is trying to push forward with the reform when it comes to intervening when there are fake news or disinformation, misinformation, or perceived fake news in media or independent streamers on YouTube as well. So it's been a controversy how to define these YouTubers. Like, would we use the existing press-related laws to govern them or separately? So I think the decision was that we should do it separately. And Lee today sort of his remarks led to a slightly awkward moment because there were like 150 journalists sitting in front of him. And he was saying, well, if you publish fake news, like you should be paying for that a lot. And the journalist was like, So it does look like he's keeping a very close eye on this law, although it's a National Assembly jurisdiction. He was also saying that when we are amending this law, it should be made sure that the correction news, like the news that we're misreporting on something out of mistake, and the news that were published out of malice, they should be separated. But this is like decades old problem in South Korean legal system, because in South Korea, you actually can be sued for citing the fact as well if you had malicious intention. So all of these are something that we have to keep an eye on how exactly the presidential office aides and the ministers will be following up on.
Looking to stay informed about South Korea's fast evolving political, business and cultural landscape? Join us on Korea Pro, the go-to resource for in-depth analysis expertly curated by top-tier professionals. And now you can pick the membership level that best suits your needs, thanks to our new subscription packages. Starting at just $199 annually, you can access daily analysis and our weekly podcast. Or try our premium membership package, which offers additional perks such as executive briefings, monthly reports and forecasts, networking receptions and event opportunities, as well as much, much more. To find the best fit for you, just head to signup.koreapro.org and become a member today.
Week ahead?
Right, so week ahead, we'll see next week from the 15th to the 19th, we'll see the multi-domain Freedom Edge drills between the U.S. ROK and Japan. So right now, we have not heard of any strategic assets from the United States that will be coming to the peninsula as of yet. But we have seen over the past 2 iterations of the Freedom Edge drills that U.S. Nuclear-powered aircraft carriers were headlining such drills. But as I've said, no known assets have been announced.
So this is the type of drill that started during Yoon administration, during Yoon and Biden, right?
So it was a direct result of the Camp David summit in 2023, and it was solidified in June 2024, if I believe, and carried out in the same month.
And what's going on with Japanese domestic politics right now after Ishiba said he will resign?
Right, so Ishiba resigned just last weekend, I believe, and the current contenders, or the ones who will throw their hats in the ring for the next LDP, that's the Liberal Democratic Party presidency, will be Sane Takaichi and also Shinjiro Koizumi. And that's supposed to start on the 22nd, so the week after next.
Okay, and both are more hawkish when it comes to South Korea history.
Much more conservative than the moderate Ishiba.
Compared to Ishiba, okay. We also have the anniversary of the September 2018 Comprehensive Military Agreement that the two Koreas signed, but withdrew afterward. Last year, the Lee administration have been saying that they want to put it back on. So we will need to keep an eye on any movements that the Lee administration might make when it comes to North Korea.
And all of this information will be sent to your email inboxes by 2 p.m. on Monday via the Week Ahead newsletter.
And if you're a fan of this podcast and if you particularly like this episode, found it interesting, please leave a review and maybe 5 stars, please.
Have a good weekend, everyone. Bye.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in.
If you want to know more, sign up for our daily executive briefings. We'll brief you on all you need to know from the past 24 hours and why it matters, delivered to your inbox every morning.
If you want to stay ahead of the curve, sign up for Korea Pro to get a full package of insights, from daily expert analysis to profiles, month in review, week ahead, and more.
And until next time, I'm Jeongmin Kim.
I'm Joon Ha Park.
And I'm John Lee, and we'll see you next time on the Korea Pro Podcast.